You've read the books, you've watched the videos, you've promised yourself this time will be different. And yet somehow, weeks later, you find yourself in the exact same place again, procrastinating, choosing the wrong relationship, avoiding the difficult conversation, or repeating a habit you swore you'd stopped. So if you already know what to do, why do you keep doing the opposite? If that feels familiar, you're far from the only person experiencing it. And more importantly, there's a real psychological reason behind it. Repeating a pattern doesn't automatically mean you're lazy, weak, or lacking discipline. In many cases, it means your brain is following a script it learned long before you consciously understood what was happening. Once you see that script clearly, the way you view yourself starts to change. In this video, we're going to look at 5 hidden reasons your brain keeps pulling you back into familiar patterns. We'll start with what's happening on the surface, then dig into what's driving it underneath, and finally explore why understanding the pattern is often the first real step toward changing it. 1. The knowledge-action gap. One of the biggest myths in self-improvement is the idea that knowledge automatically creates change. It doesn't. Knowing what to do and actually doing it are controlled by different systems in the brain. Information can live in your mind for years without ever becoming behavior. Think about exercise. Almost everyone knows movement is good for them, yet gyms aren't full 24 hours a day. The issue isn't information, it's execution. What this means for you is simple. Repeating a pattern doesn't necessarily mean you haven't learned the lesson. Quick question. If you've ever caught yourself repeating a pattern you already understood, comment again below. And that raises an interesting question. If knowledge isn't enough, what is actually driving the behavior? 2. The familiarity trap. Your brain values familiarity more than happiness. That sounds strange, but familiarity feels safe because it's predictable. Even uncomfortable patterns can become psychologically comfortable when you've repeated them enough times. It's like walking the same path through a forest every day. Eventually, the trail becomes easy to follow, while every new path feels uncertain. You may leave one toxic situation only to find yourself in another that looks surprisingly similar, not because you wanted it, but because your brain recognized the terrain. The implication is powerful. Sometimes you're not choosing what feels good. You're choosing what feels familiar. But familiarity is only half the picture because there's something underneath this that most people never see. 3. The brain's prediction machine. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what will happen next. In fact, one of its primary jobs is reducing uncertainty. When you've repeated a pattern for years, your brain becomes incredibly good at predicting the outcome, even if that outcome isn't ideal. And here's where it gets interesting. Imagine a GPS that keeps routing you down the same road because it's the only route it knows. The GPS isn't trying to ruin your trip, it's simply using the map it already has. The same thing happens psychologically. Your brain often prefers a known disappointment over an unknown possibility. What this means for you is that change can feel uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. And once a pattern becomes predictable, something else begins to happen. 4. The identity loop. Over time, behaviors stop feeling like things you do and start feeling like who you are. This is where patterns become especially difficult to break. If you spent years telling yourself, I'm a procrastinator, I'm bad with money, or I always mess relationships up, your brain starts protecting that identity. Why? Because humans like consistency. Your mind would rather be consistently wrong than unpredictably different. Imagine wearing the same pair of glasses for 10 years. Eventually, you forget you're wearing them at all. The implication here is profound. You may be fighting a behavior when the real battle is the story you've attached to it. And that story exists for a reason. 5. The pattern was solving a problem. This is the part most people miss. Almost every repeated behavior began as an adaptation. In other words, it solved something. Avoidance may have protected you from criticism. Perfectionism may have protected you from embarrassment. People-pleasing may have helped you maintain connection. The pattern wasn't created randomly. At some point, it worked. So why does your brain keep returning to it? Because deep down, it still believes the old problem exists. A smoke alarm doesn't know whether the fire happened yesterday or today. It only knows what it's been trained to react to. And your brain often works the same way. The implication is that lasting change usually begins with understanding what the pattern was trying to protect, not attacking yourself for having it. Up until now, we've been talking about why the pattern exists, but understanding the pattern isn't the same as changing it. So what do you actually do the next time you catch yourself in the middle of it? At that moment, try these 3 steps. Step 1. Name the pattern. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with me?" try saying, "I'm running the avoidance pattern again." Or, "I'm running the people-pleasing pattern again." Giving the pattern a name creates distance between you and the behavior. You're no longer the pattern. You're observing it. Step 2. Find the need. Ask yourself, what is this trying to protect me from? Judgment? Rejection? Failure? Embarrassment? The answer doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to become curious enough to see what's underneath the behavior. Step 3. Choose a 2% different action. Most people try to change everything at once. Your brain hates that. Instead, look for a tiny deviation from the usual script. If you normally avoid the conversation, send the first message. If you normally procrastinate for hours, work for 5 minutes. If you normally stay silent, say one honest sentence. Small actions may feel insignificant, but they're how your brain learns that another path exists. Every time you take a slightly different action, you're showing your mind evidence that the old pattern isn't the only option anymore. And over time, that's how the trail through the forest begins to change. Think back to the beginning of this video, that moment where you found yourself repeating something you already knew better than to do. Maybe you've been treating that moment as evidence that you're weak. Maybe you've been using it as proof that you'll never change. But hopefully you can see it differently now. The real takeaway isn't that you're lacking discipline. It's that your brain is often running old programs designed for situations that no longer exist. And that's an important distinction, because if a pattern was learned, it can be unlearned. If a script was written, it can be rewritten. The fact that you notice the pattern at all is actually significant. Awareness is what allows you to step outside the loop and observe it rather than automatically live inside it. You're not someone who keeps failing the same lesson. You're someone who is finally beginning to understand the system behind it. And understanding the system is where change starts. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. If this video helped you understand yourself a little more clearly, subscribe to Brain Simplified. Every week, we break down the hidden psychology behind everyday thoughts, emotions, and behaviors so you can work with your mind instead of fighting it. Ever wonder why, even after success, your brain whispers doubts? Watch Psychology of People Who Feel Like Frauds Despite Actually Being Competent. Next, it explains why this happens and how to come out of it. I'll see you there.